The Fool is an archetype of a transformation. So essentially, if you want to change your life or if you want to change yourself, you gotta learn how to follow this path of the Fool, the Trickster, or a Joker. These are all basically names describing the same phenomena. So what exactly is the Fool? The character which we might describe as a Fool is a character full of unpredictability, most likely full of unconventional ideas, and most importantly, very creative. We might also say that the Fool is full of wisdom. However, this wisdom is not something really generated through the experience or through the conscious knowledge, but rather it comes from this unconscious and highly intuitive place within the psyche. And this wisdom manifests itself through accidental behaviors of the Fool. So it might seem like the Fool manipulates the situation or tries to change it to their advantage, but very often the character of the Fool does things rather intuitively and improvises on the spot, and through this improvisation, such wisdom can come to the light. So we might say that the Fool is very wise, but because he doesn't know or she doesn't know where that wisdom is coming from and how to properly apply it in life, we also call such an individual the Fool. Now, the whole agenda behind acting as the Fool or the Fool, the archetype of the Fool, is to challenge the status quo, challenge the existing rules or social order in order to simply generate some chaos and generate novel ideas, novel behaviors, novel attitudes. So basically the Fool stirs a particular context or a particular situation and introduces novel elements in order to transform the situation and put it on a path of a different development, different future to the one that has been existing before. Now, essentially the Fool is a collective archetype, so that when an individual is drawn to act upon this pattern of behaviors and taking an action in the world, does something to transform the society, transform the environment around them. However, we know that archetypes also influence our minds and our psyche on a very individual and personal level. So probably the biggest example here would be the hero's journey, which is essentially a path of transformation, path of individuation, where a human becomes more mature and becomes self-actualized, which means that they are more independent from the society, they are more independent from the social beliefs, social values, and instead of conforming to whatever has been imposed upon them, they learn how to make their own decisions, how to create and follow their own value system, their own belief system. So they are not merely reacting to the social world, but they are acting upon it. They respond to it in a very individual way. So what would happen if you introduced the archetype of a Fool into your psychic life? Basically, as I've said before, the Fool generates this novel dynamics or novel mechanisms within a specific context or a situation. So if we were to apply it to a personal psychic life, then we're going to encounter a quite interesting situation, because the Fool is going to force us to challenge our own beliefs, our own opinions and attitudes, and it's going to introduce something which we might not be able to understand initially. And as we know, usually the psychic life, whatever goes in our mind, influences how we behave. So basically, if you feel in a particular way, you're going to act in a consistent way to how you feel. If you have a particular value system or belief system, or if you have certain set of goals, you're going to act consistently upon what's going on in your mind. So if we introduce the Fool on the mental level, obviously that's going to influence our behavior as well. So in other words, what would happen if you started acting in a fool, if you became this manifestation of the fool itself. In this case, if you were to manifest the archetype of the fool in the real life, you probably gonna start acting more or less opposite to what you are used to. So for example, if you are used to being a very timid and shy person, the fool will motivate you to act more extroverted or perhaps being more outgoing, and so on and forth. So in a way, it's an act of rebellion against what you've been used to believing, what you've been comfortable with perceiving in the world, and most importantly, rebellion against your own reactions to certain situations. So in a way, it might seem like a very risky and very foolish endeavor to pursue because, let's say you are a very organized person, so you like to have a certain schedule during the day, you like to finish your work on time. If you're gonna allow this archetype to manifest itself, or if it just happens to manifest through yourself, through your actions, then you suddenly might become quite comfortable with chaos, with being disorganized. Suddenly you might start, being late for meetings or not completing your work on time because you might be feeling like you are being drawn into this opposite dimension of your comfortable and familiar patterns of behaviors. Now, you might ask, why the hell would I want to do that? Why would I allow this crazy archetype to dominate my life or to force me into possibly self-destructive pathways of living if everything that I'm having or if everything that happens in my life is quite comfortable and feels like it's right for me? Well, for some people, yes, the fool might be quite destructive, but it depends on your goal, depends on what you want to achieve. But in other cases, this archetype of the fool might be very beneficial. On the other hand, in some cases, it's not fully our choice whether we want to manifest this archetype or not, whether we want to play the fool, whether we're gonna allow this to manifest through our behaviors, because our minds, our psychology is wired for self-preservation. It's basically motivated to survive. Our bodies as a whole, including our minds and psychology, are wired to do anything to survive. So if your psychology, if your psyche decides that it's going to be beneficial for you to start acting as a fool and to allow this archetype to manifest through your life, this is what's going to happen. But on the other hand, you might prevent it from happening and bottle this, kind of repress this content, repress this drive, and not allow it to manifest itself, which gonna have some future consequences, because the more you repress, the more drives you repress, the more your unconscious mind is gonna push onto your conscious mind, push onto your ego until you break and allow it to express itself, or in other cases, due to this repression and not allowing this various drives to express themselves, different archetypes to express themselves, in other cases, some people might fall into very deep depressions because they repressed so much of this natural and often quite impulsive drives that they have to spend a lot of energy just to maintain this repression or denial, this very thick barrier between the conscious mind, the ego, and the unconscious mind. So if some individual feels like they are stuck in their lives, they are stuck in their routine, they are bored, or if their life has no meaning, then following this archetype of the fool and basically rebelling against everything that makes them feel comfortable and perhaps even doing precisely the opposite what they've been doing can be very beneficial, because it can introduce novel drives towards behaving, towards pursuing new opportunities, and towards, becoming essentially quite different person, because the moment you are prepared to embrace exactly the opposite of what you've been doing, or precisely the opposite of who you think you are, that is precisely the moment when You can learn new things about yourself and the world. You can develop new skills. You can learn how to act in novel situations. And essentially, it's very beneficial for yourself and for your body, because that's what will help you to become more adaptable to novel situations. So you basically, if you look at your mind as a computer, then you can simply say that you will learn these new algorithms, new patterns of behaving, and essentially learning more about the world itself, learning about these new patterns in the world, so that you can predict certain situations. And so essentially you can then adapt to this unfamiliar events. So this has been my short attempt on the archetype of the Fool and how it manifests itself on our psychological level and on our external and behavioral level. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. And if you enjoy my content, please share and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week.